Okay, so Sachin, thank you for talking to me once again. We talked a couple of years ago and about the work that you were doing at that time at the Bay. And that's been a popular video inside our digital transformation program. Particularly, people have been reviewing it and discussing what you had to say. And it's advanced the learning of many people. So, thank you for doing it. But they've also asked in our course reviews, we've had people asking, well, what happened next? And I know in your case, there are a few things we can talk about here that are important to that about what happened next. You're now no longer with the Bay, but you are just still doing some work with them. So we're going to touch on that, touch on what you're doing now. But I thought as a starting point, we might conclude on what you were doing at the Bay and then move on to what you're doing now. So first of all, in the time between your last interview and leaving the Bay, how have things progressed? Because, retail has continued to change at a rapid rate, and the Bay's changes, which you were managing at that time, the Bay has continued to change too.
Yeah, I think first of all, thanks for having me back on. Great to chat again. And I think when we last left, the business had at that point been split, if I remember correctly, and there was a hope to really aggressively go into the market and build the Bay into more of an e-commerce platform. I think a lot has changed since then, for sure. What really happened was the market, kind of beginning of last year, started to really soften in terms of the valuations that e-commerce companies were getting, like Shopify. If you remember, the stock took a big hit. Amazon, all of those, Wayfair, the bigger ones, and so going to market, the conditions were less favorable for that, and what investors were starting to really look for was profitable companies, profitable growth, and it was less about growing the top line and more focused on sustainable growth. And I think that was, in a way, a call to the ownership team to say, well, we probably need to refocus our business a little bit back to where the fundamentals lay, which is a lot of real estate, a lot of stores, with an e-commerce business that still, I think, was robust, and really think about how to make that work. And I think I can speak more in generalities on what we've seen across the market as well. And some of this is just my perspective as well. But I think, what we were trying to do, and I'd say what is still happening with a lot of companies building out kind of the new way of building retail, which is a platform, I think still the future, right? I don't think there's any denying that. The challenge is you have these retailers that have so much space, so much inventory that has to be kind of dealt with as a problem, that it's almost something you say, I need to figure out a way to deal with this, and putting the future a bit on hold, which in a way is maybe not always going to be what you should be doing as a business, but businesses only have so much capital and so much cash flow. Most retailers and department stores around the world, like, their cash flow is very, very poor, I would say. Right now, especially, the industry is very, very challenged, and as a result of that, you're having to pick and choose on almost how do you mitigate as much loss as you can. I think the reality of the business forces of the world kind of dictating what is relevant and what is not have clearly shown e-commerce and this more call it digital first way of shopping is the future. It's not going away, and I think it's a matter of now the next couple of years, like, where do things start to play out? A lot of retailers are going out of business. There's consolidation, there's store closures, there's rationalization, and so where that goes in the next couple of years, I think, will be interesting to watch.
Absolutely, and a really interesting answer, because what you seem to be suggesting is that the traditional retailers, if we might call the Bay and others like that term, they experienced COVID. There was a rush to online at that time. but in the period as we've got back to the closer to the old normal, though not there and never likely to be there, what you're saying is their response to this change we've seen over that period has been to say, well, we need to focus on what we're good at or what we did before. We think that might still have a role in the future. We also have our own financial position, which is challenging to deal with. And so our response now is perhaps to go a bit less quickly into online and to do more to try and support our bricks and mortar. Is that correct? Or
I think that's fair. You know, the reality is with a lot of these businesses, including the Bay, there's just a significant amount of fixed cost that exists in the business, right? And so one viewpoint could be, well, this fixed cost is what it is, and arguably your cash flow should be put towards offsetting that fixed cost as much as you can, right? And make sure that you can make that into a viable asset as much as you can. I think for pretty much any retailer, like they haven't seen the rebound that they would have wanted post-COVID, right? There was a bit of a rush for a while, but I mean, this year the economy has been quite soft, especially for discretionary goods. And so I think that's simply the answer, to say, how can we fix that business as much as we can?
Very interesting. So as far as you're personally concerned, you left the Bay last January, and you have continued your focus on online. So I guess the question is, what are you doing now?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think a lot of what we were trying to do at the Bay, which was build sort of what we called supplier enablement tools, I think there was still a need unmet in the market. And what we mean by that is, you know, retailers, they don't produce products generally. They make most of their money off of almost reselling goods to customers. Inherently, they are a platform for brands. They're not like, and retailers often think they make money by selling lots of products. Well, they actually make money by, you know, making margins off of brands that sell products. And so our thinking at the time was, well, we need to give brands more levers to grow their business within the Bay ecosystem and charge lots of money to do that. And brands were willing to pay because they didn't have access to a lot of the things that the Bay had at the time, which was like great fulfillment, really significant digital marketing scale, things like that. And so, you know, the business that I launched called Maple Direct is almost a similar model, just agnostic to platforms. So what we're building is what we're calling a growth platform for brands that are looking to scale their business online. So we're giving them, you know, everything they need, from the right, you know, information and insights, the right access to customers and customer data, digital marketing tools and capabilities, fulfillment, right? And on the flip side, also distribution and channel management. So all of that is in kind of one centralized infrastructure that gives brands who, you know, they traditionally are used to working with retailers in a more wholesale capacity. As that model becomes more difficult to manage, this is an alternative route for them to say, well, you can achieve scale and reach the Canadian customer in a bit of a different way.
Okay, very straightforward. That makes sense. Giving brands access to the market, or direct access, I guess, to the market. The obvious question in my mind, and this may reflect my own lack of knowledge about what you do, but what's the difference between what you're doing and Amazon?
Well, so Amazon is a platform, right? Whereas we are almost a provider that would help brands use those types of platforms. So we would help brands launch on Shopify, on Amazon, on Wayfair, on the Bay, on all those other marketplaces as a channel, right? And so we're not actually building an e-commerce platform for customers. We're building a B2B product.
Okay, that's straightforward. So you're basically helping businesses get online with all the different things they need to do, including selecting an appropriate channel and supporting their movement into that and their operation of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think our rationale is pretty simple, right? Running a business direct or running a business on marketplace from a unit economic standpoint for these brands, it actually works really, really well because you're not paying a whole lot of fees to retailers at the end of the day. You're paying them a much smaller commission than you would by going the traditional route. The retailer's happy because they're not actually owning any of the inventory, and the customer's happy because they're getting more choice than ever in the market. So this is something that we're offering both to brands that are in Canada today and brands that are looking to enter the market in a way that is a lot more, asset light. So typically it'll take a brand who wants to come to Canada a year to enter the market. They'll have to register a business, find a distribution company. The distribution company will try to get them into, shelves in stores, things like that. What we do is we say, we'll launch you in 12 weeks. We'll get your business registered, tax number. We list you online and you're live, right? It's a very quick way to almost get into a market that we know Canadians are interested in seeing these types of brands in a bigger way.
Okay. And with those bigger brands, in the past, they may have been less accessible online. And that may have led people to go to places like the Bay and to other, retail locations to be able to get to those brands. You're now making those available online. To what extent do you think this is going to influence the change in people's shopping behaviors? Because presumably, if they now have access to brands that they could have bought that they would have gone to a department store or a physical retail location for before, they're going to be less likely to go there. So it seems to me that your business is likely to accelerate the movement towards online.
I would say so. I mean, like Amazon has done that, right? And like in a big way, you can basically get anything, any brand on Amazon, but often it's resellers, people who are, buying it, and you're paying a lot of duties. Like, so for us, it's just, it is, I would say, accelerating that process and, giving, as you said, the consumer more access to brands that they would typically not have.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. So you're working with this business at the moment, and and it's growing. You tell me the business is going very well.
So far so good. I'd say we've been operating for 3 months now, and have a handful of fairly sizable clients and a pretty growing pipeline that we're hopeful will continue to accelerate into the new year as we hopefully see a bit more of a normalized economy and all that as well.
Okay, and certainly as we look broadly at the retail sector, this is a facilitation, I guess, of traditional brands, or perhaps not necessarily just traditional, but assistance for them with their digital transformation, with their movement into the digital age.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, a lot of brands, their core competency is creating good products, right? And that's why they exist. They create good products that people want. And then they rely on distributors and retailers to get that product in front of customers. And I think because of the fact that that model is just becoming less and less favorable in the consumer's mind today, that model is also less reliable for brands to use to reach those customers. So this is sort of saying, let's do what has been done in the past in a way that's more modern, that still gives you the same access, but it's in a much more economically effective way as well.
Okay. I just have one more question. You may have other things that you want to add to the to tell the people who will be watching. My last question is around any advice you would have. It's just basically a catch-all question, but basically trying to gain your expertise as in giving advice to the people who will be watching. But I'm especially interested in, it's been a couple of years since we've chatted, and what might have changed during that time in terms of your thinking around digital transformation and around the advice that you might give people today compared to what you might have given 2 years ago? That might be a tough question, but
Yeah,
I'll ask it anyway.
yeah. I mean, I can't remember what I said 2 years ago. I don't know if the answer will change that much, but maybe I'll make it more relevant and specific to what's been going on. Obviously, there's a lot of interesting technologies that are continuing to emerge. AI now is talked about a lot. I mean, it's existed for a long time. And I feel like every company now talks about AI and their AI strategy. Before that, it was Web3, and there's always going to be something like that. And all of these things are relevant to digital transformation, right? But I think where things often go wrong for when people are thinking about new technologies is they think about a technology that's really cool. They don't think about like the business application of that technology. And so what I would say is like emerging technologies are always going to be that, which are emerging technologies that I have hopes of transforming business. To succeed, I think you almost have to start with the business problem first versus the application. Because you're talking about AI for retail as an example. Well, every retailer is, I would say, pretty much around the world is not very good at inventory management. Like they're okay, but they could all be a lot better. And a lot of that is done by manual processes. And there's only really one retailer, and I wouldn't call them a retailer, but one process that I've seen work well, which is how Amazon does their inventory management, and it's all done by AI. Every retailer should be adopting that, but a lot of retailers are looking at Chat GPT integrations into their websites and all these other fancy things that may not have a lot of business utility. Like when we're talking about business transformation and technology, let's use things that are proven, focus on those, and scale them to actually solve real problems. And I think that's, I think for anybody coming into the industry, like think about, what is a business's core competencies? So what makes them good? How can AI actually improve on that, or technology improve on that, and make it more sustainable for the future versus sort of the other way around, like trying to change a business model based on a technology. And I think that's something that is applicable for any industry.
Great advice. Advice that certainly seems important with what I see too, particularly around AI today, where there's a lot of excitement about the things it might be able to do, but that does seem a bit detached from the reality of the things that a lot of businesses are having to deal with. Not that it doesn't have value, but yes, big problem. Okay, that was all I had for you today, Sachin. Did you have anything else that you wanted to contribute before we finish today?
No, I mean, I think like this was great again, getting a chance to chat with you. And I mean, for any of the students out there, I'd be happy to connect and share some of my experiences as well. And just I think it's great to hear from the future generation of leaders as well. So don't hesitate.
Thanks, Sachin, for doing it again. And I may get back in touch in another couple of years to see what you're doing at that point. But I really appreciate you talking today.
Sounds like a plan.